some of the more eagle-eyed observers out there, people who watch the Morning Pit on a daily basis, which I hope is all of you, but I understand if maybe it's not. The more eagle-eyed observers out there might notice something right off the bat, and that it's that we've got a basketball slideshow on the Morning Pit today. And I wasn't, refusing to do it, holding off until the basketball team won a game. But at the same time, I also kind of was holding off until the basketball team won a game again. I didn't have any inclination to change the slideshow or take the football slideshow out of there after we had some football news, whatever it was, like a week or two ago. I put the football slideshow in. I wasn't going to put a basketball slideshow in when they kept losing and kept not playing well and kept being more and more of a disappointment. But you know what they did on Saturday? They went out and beat Miami, one of the worst teams in the ACC, but there was a time when we would have said that about Virginia as well. And Pitt beating Virginia was no guarantee as the Panthers lost to the Cavaliers a couple weeks ago. Pitt coming off a win over Miami on Saturday at the Peterson Event Center, a much-needed win, breaking the 4-game losing streak and keeping that slim hope alive of an NCAA tournament bid. And here come all the comments. Pitt's not making the NCAA tournament. Pitt's not making the NCAA tournament. And yeah, right now the smart money would be on Pitt not making the NCAA tournament. But the reality is that door is still slightly ajar. And not just, if they go on a run in the ACC tournament and win the conference, then they can get in, an NC State type of thing. I think the door is still slightly ajar for earning a bid in the regular season. By the end of the regular season, more or less locking themselves into an NCAA tournament bid. Now, that would likely require winning out, but I do think that if they win out, then they would be a lock. But let's set that aside for now, okay? Because that's not the most relevant thing that came out of Saturday's game. As a matter of fact, Saturday's game had no shortage of storylines, plenty to talk about in that game. Maybe almost as much as we've had, almost as many storylines as we've had coming out of all the losses that they had recently. There were equally as many, if not more, storylines in that win over Miami, and not just because they won, but there's a whole lot. Guys who didn't play, guys who got an opportunity. Amsal Delic, right? Ishmael Leggett's performance was a huge performance. I thought Cam Corrin showed some things that he has not showed all season long. The rebounding, there's a lot to talk about. The assists, there's a lot to talk about from Pitt's win over Miami. So let's jump into it, get your week started on a good note for the first time in a while here on the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'd like to think that any week that starts with the Morning Pit is starting on a good note, regardless of whether or not Pitt won or lost. But certainly, everybody's got an extra little spring in their step when they, when it's coming off of a victory. Particularly like the one that Pitt had on Saturday. And, early on, it had all the hallmarks of another disappointment. Pitt was down 8 points. I think it was 21-13 at one point in the first half. Another game this season against ACC competition where they've fallen behind by a rather significant amount in the first half. It didn't get to double digits, but now I believe 13 out of 14 ACC games this season, Pitt has trailed by at least 8 points in the first half. It's not a trend that you want to continue, but at this point, when you're 14 games in, it's not a trend anymore. It's just who you are. You have slow starts, and that's who Pitt was on Saturday. But we knew going in that it was going to be a challenging game. Obviously, Damian Dunn was not going to play. Jeff Capel made it official after the game and sort of acted like he didn't know why we didn't all just assume Damian Dunn would be done for the season. Capel, to that point, had said they were still waiting to hear from the doctors, and then on Saturday he officially said, yeah, Dunn is out, which I think we all assumed. More notable, though, is the absence of Jalen Lowe, Pitt's starting point guard. Suffered a concussion in the loss at SMU on Tuesday night. Seemed unlikely he would play on Saturday, and sure enough, there he was in sweatpants. And those two absences created some pretty big holes in the lineup. Now, the Dunn absence, they were somewhat accustomed to because he had missed 7 games earlier in the season. The Lowe absence, though, was not one they were accustomed to, and not one that they were necessarily. I can't say that they weren't prepared for it. They certainly spent Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, or however many practice days they could have in there. They spent those days preparing for life without Jalen Lowe for however long that might be. And after the game on Saturday, Capel was rather optimistic that Lowe will be back for tomorrow night's game against Syracuse. But it's one thing to practice and it's one thing to prepare, and it's another thing to go out on the court without your team leader, without your point guard, without the guy whose team it is. It's Jalen Lowe's team, and Jalen Lowe was watching Saturday's game from the bench. I was struck, as many of you likely were, by how the ball moved in Saturday's game. I mean, it was undeniable. The passes were crisper, they were sharper, there were more of them. The ball just moved a lot more on Saturday than it has in recent games. And I paused before saying that because I've been wrestling with this all weekend of how much I put on Jalen Lowe's absence, how much I put on just Miami not being very good, and I think it's some combination there, and how much I put on some of the other guys who got on the court, Brandon Cummings or Amsal Delilich, and how that sort of, changed the way the ball was moving and the passing and things like that. And I think it's a combination of all of it. Like everything we say here about this game is inevitably going to come with the caveat, well, it was Miami. Miami only has 2 wins in the ACC this year. They're a potentially dangerous team. I think they beat Syracuse, but I mean, ultimately they're not very good. And their record is, who they are. I mean, at this point, when you're, 20 games into a season or, 15 games into a season, 16 games, 14 games, I mean, like, there's not a lot of surprises about who you are. You pretty much established your identity at this point. And so Miami, even with some talent on the roster, is not very good. And that kind of underscores everything we're talking about here. And so I don't want to keep saying it over and over again, but understand that even when I speak positively about this team, I understand that they did it against one of the bottom teams in the conference. And so that's part of it. Lowe's absence. How much did Jalen Lowe's absence contribute to the fact that Pitt had 15 assists, which is actually the third most they've had in an ACC game this season? They had 17 against... Which game was that? Clemson, in the loss to Clemson, the overtime game. And they had 16 against SMU, actually, on Tuesday night, and they had 16 in the win over Cal, that game on January 1st. And then they had 15 on Saturday against Miami. Is it because Jalen Lowe wasn't out there? Like, did taking Lowe out of the mix open up something in the offense, lead to more passing, lead to less dribbling for 15 seconds and then trying to drive and hope to draw a foul? Maybe. I actually have a theory about it, and I tried to ask Jeff Capel about this, but didn't exactly get the answer I was hoping to get, or even really kind of along the lines of what I was thinking I would get. But my theory is this: not necessarily that Jalen Lowe was responsible for less passing or bad passing. And not necessarily that taking him out opened things up and everybody passed better because Lowe wasn't out there. But there is part of me that thinks that the guys who played on Saturday, whether it was the new guys who were getting, extra minutes for the first time, Brandon Cummings or Amsal Delilich, or at least the first time in a long time, or some of the guys who've been out there all along, Ishmael Leggett and Zach Austin and Cam Corrin, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, who I think had 3 assists in that game. I think, and I tried to ask Capel this, and he really didn't bite on it, but I think those guys elevated their play a little bit because they knew they didn't have Lowe. So it wasn't necessarily that taking Lowe out made the team better, but the team sort of played a little bit better, maybe because they knew they didn't have Jalen Lowe. I think Jalen Lowe does so much for this team. I think he's so important to this team. I think he's such a valuable, talented player on this team that sometimes his teammates defer to him. And when we talk about, that sort of generalized idea, envision or an image of Jalen Lowe dribbling for 16, 17 seconds and then just trying to drive and no ball movement, no real screens, nothing approaching any, kind of organized 5-on-5 basketball concepts. Maybe some of what we're saying, first of all, I don't think that happens as much as we make it out to happen, but it happens often enough that it feels like it happens all the time. But second of all, maybe some of that derives from early on, and this was suggested to me on Saturday in a conversation I had, early on, Lowe and Leggett really were making everything. Lowe and Leggett really were doing everything. And at a certain point, consciously or subconsciously, maybe his teammates started deferring to him a little bit. When it looks like there's no ball movement, when it looks like there's no off-ball movement, which is probably even more important than the ball movement itself, maybe part of that is, all right, Jalen's got this one. Well, it doesn't quite work that way, or it doesn't always work out well when you try to do that. And, maybe without Jalen Lowe out there was a little extra spark. There was a little extra fire, a little extra energy of, okay, we got to move. We've got to pass. We can't just sit back and let Jalen, win the game for us, which he has either done or come close to doing on multiple occasions this season. And so it's probably some combination thereof, of Miami not being very good, of different guys getting the ball, different guys getting on the court and maybe bringing a little extra energy and urgency because they're getting big minutes for the first time in a while. And maybe just everybody just stepping it up a little bit, playing a little bit, doing a little bit more, being a little sharper, a little crisper, a little more urgent. And you saw the result. The result was a really well-played game of basketball after the first 10 minutes or so, or 15 minutes. Once Pitt kind of took control of the game, I thought they played pretty well on both ends of the court. I think Miami started off, made like 5 of their first 9 or 5 of their first 9 3-pointers. This is for a team that was one of the worst in the ACC in 3-point shooting percentage. And you watch that happen and you said to yourself, like, oh God, here they go. Pitt is a terrible defensive, terrible 3-point defensive team. And Miami, who's not good at shooting threes, is going to look like a great 3-point shooting. They're going to look like the Warriors or something. They're going to look like a great 3-point shooting team because that's how bad Pitt's defense is. And that's how it looked early on in the first 10 minutes or so. But then they clamped down. And I think Miami only made like 2 more out of their next 11 or 3 out of their next 11 to finish the game. Something like that. I forget what the final number ended up being. Maybe it was 3 out of their next 14 or something. But they were far more in line with what they have shot all season after Pitt's defense kind of locked down a little bit. But I just couldn't get over the energy in the team. This is a team that has looked worn down, and like physically, but also emotionally. I say they look worn down emotionally. What the hell do I know? But I'm watching them on the court, and they just don't seem to have that kind of fire that they need. When I'm watching them in the SMU game or watching the Virginia game, even the Carolina game to some extent. And so on Saturday, I was very much concerned that we were going to see that same kind of performance, particularly without Jalen Lowe. That the loss of Jalen Lowe might be, knock these guys down a peg even more. And instead, I think we got the opposite. Not for 40 minutes, but for the bulk of the game, we got some high energy play. That guy right there, Cam Corrin, didn't play his best game. Didn't play his best game. Put up a good stat line, 17 and 8 or something like that. But he didn't play his best game. What was his stat line? I have the box score here. Why would I just guess? Yeah, 17 and 8. But he was more active, offensively, more active than we have seen all season long. Like more just getting after it. He had a little extra fire to his step, a little more energy, a little more active. And it's probably not the kind of thing that's going to win games unless he can turn that activity and energy into more rebounds, which again, 8 rebounds is pretty good for Cam Corrin, to be honest, with how he's played this season, particularly on the glass. But there was just a little something extra to how he was playing. And obviously Brandon Cummings and Amsal Delilich getting their first, real run, it feels like of the season. I mean, those guys have had some different games where they played an extended chunk of minutes, but they brought some extra energy. And it took a little bit of time to settle in. Cummings got the start at point guard in place of Lowe. Ishmael Leggett ran the point a little bit, and Amsal Delilich came in and ran the point a little bit. And you might feel like I'm burying the lead, and there's some truth to that. I am. Because look, I still take shots about and not in like the post game, let's take the backshore apparel shot of the game. I still take shots from you guys about how much I hyped up Amsal Delilich. There was a question in the mailbag on Friday about, basically poking fun at how bad I've been at hyping up some players. Although I got Kyle Lewis right. So you guys have to give me credit for that. I'm sorry. You do. And when Amsal Delilich leads this team on a run through the ACC tournament, everybody's going to be apologizing to me then. I kid, but you saw some flashes of what he can do in this game on Saturday. And there's probably good reasons why he hasn't been playing. There's probably good reasons why he hasn't attempted or he hasn't made a field goal since like January 4th. And he's only got about 4 shots since then. There's probably good reasons for that. And I'm not going to sit here and say, I know everything that happens in practice. I know what Delalich shows the coaches of why they should or shouldn't be able to trust him on the court. I don't know. I believe that Jeff Capel and his staff, that they want to win games. And so they'll put the players out there that they believe give them the best chance to win games. I believe that. But what we saw from Delalich on Saturday, he's a hooper. He's a basketball player. Like, he can go out and make plays. He can make things happen on the court. And, he may lag a little bit behind on defense. He's still got, obviously, I think by his own admission, he's still got some growth to do there. But he's gotten a better idea of what he can and cannot get away with, I think, when he's got the ball, as a ball handler on offense. And he was working as a point guard. And he had a good sense of when to drive and when to pass. He loves the pass. The ball just flies out of his hands. They're still getting used to his passes. And he can make those shots from outside. And he was doing a lot on Saturday. He was setting up good passes for assists, putbacks, knocking down threes. The only thing that he's shown that he can't do really as far as scoring is foul shots. That seems to be some weird hole in his game. But you can't convince me that guy is incapable of helping you. Even with Jalen Lowe back, right? So Tuesday night, tomorrow night, they play Syracuse at the Peterson Event Center. Jalen Lowe comes back. You can't convince me that there's not still a role for Amsal Delalich to get 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or something like that. Like there has to be, because he can help you. He brings that energy. He brings that electricity. And he's not the only guy who brings it. Zach Austin brings it. Ishmael Leggett brings it. Like I said, Cam Corhin had it on Saturday. But Delalich can bring that. And things can happen. The ball moves. And when the ball starts moving, this offense can be pretty good. And like, you'd like to think that when Jalen Lowe comes back in, there'll be an understanding that, look, if the ball moves, you're going to have better opportunities for easy shots. Leggett's going to have better opportunities for easy shots. Like, everything's going to be easier if the ball moves. And with Delalich out there and with those guys playing like they did on Saturday, the ball was moving. It was. And you saw the results. You saw the outcome. And again, it's against Miami, right? Like, I think they're dead last in the ACC in field goal percentage defense. So yeah, Pitt shot 42%. They should shoot 42%. They should shoot 48%. But they did what they were supposed to do. Miami is not a good rebounding team. One of the worst rebounding teams in the conference. So yeah, Pitt did have 40 rebounds for the first time since the VMI game. They won the rebounding battle for like the 4th time in an ACC game this year. But they should. They did what they were supposed to do against a bad team. And that's the kind of thing that's keeping them hanging on. That's the kind of thing that's keeping those hopes, slim as they may be, alive. And tomorrow night, the hopes could go out the window. They lose to Syracuse tomorrow night, there's no more talk about this. It's ACC tournament championship or bust. There's no more getting back. I don't even think winning at Louisville will be enough to overcome the loss to Virginia and a loss to Syracuse at home. They have to win out in order to lock up a bid short of winning the ACC tournament. But as long as they keep winning, that will continue to be a possibility. It was just, there were points on Saturday that were genuinely fun to watch this team, and that hasn't always been the case. Certainly in the 4-game losing streak, and at various points throughout the ACC schedule, let's say. But there were points where they were genuinely fun to watch, where it was fun to watch Cam Corhin, even if it was sometimes frustrating. It was fun to watch Papa Amadou Conti. It was fun to watch Amsal Delalich. It was fun to watch Brandon Cummings. Ishmael Leggett had one of his best games. He had 21 and 10. I think it was his fourth or fifth career double-double. He had 5 assists, which tied his career high. I mean, it was one of the best games Leggett has played at Pitt. It wasn't his highest scoring game, but I think best all-around game. It was one of the best all-around games he has played at Pitt. Zach Austin put up a double-double. I think he had like 11 and 10, did a great job defensively on Matthew Cleveland. It was a good afternoon at the Peterson Event Center for Pitt. It really was. And all those minutes that Brandon Cummings got and all those minutes that Amsal Delalich got, I mean, hugely valuable minutes that should help them not just for next season. I mean, forget about next season. That should help them tomorrow night. And Cummings and Delalich should get on the court and play. You can't just go, just because Jalen Lowe's back doesn't mean you go to a 6 or 7 man rotation that ends with Guillermo Diaz-Graham. I think you've got, like, Cummings and Delalich can help you. They can help you win basketball games right now. And I think what we saw on Saturday was further evidence of it. Understanding all the caveats about who they were playing, I think there was enough evidence on Saturday that those two guys can help you. Use them. In these final 6 games, use them. Let them help you. All right. I think that about does it for today. We'll get you ready for Pitt Syracuse tomorrow and any other news that comes out. But your Pitt Panthers still alive. And I know you want to shoot me down for that. I know you'd be like, oh, shut up. They're never making the NCAA tournament. And you're probably right. But for now, the door is still open. So as long as the door's open, we might as well talk about it, right? All right. I hope you had a good weekend. I'm sure if you went to the Pitt basketball game, you probably enjoyed that other than the sloppy weather because that was a mess. Hopefully that clears up a little bit today. We'll see what that brings. But otherwise, hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a good Monday. And make sure you like this video and subscribe. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.